Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brooks River in Katmai National Park, Alaska. This is one of the best places in the world to watch brown bears fishing for salmon. We normally don't do any broadcasts, bear cam broadcasts on Mondays, but we're doing one today because of a dramatic situation that happened just a couple of days ago. It was seen live right here on the main Brooks Falls camera. So my name is Mike Fitz with explore.org, and I'm joined today by three co-hosts. I'll go down. I will introduce them one by one. First, let's start with Park Ranger Sarah Bruce. Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Mike. Thanks.
And then also, I'm joined by Katmai National Park Ranger Susan Contreras. How are you, Susan?
Hi, I'm doing well, thank you. Hello, everyone.
And then lastly, but not least, of course, is my third co-host, Naomi Boak with the Katmai Conservancy. How are you, Naomi?
I'm okay, and it's good to be here to share our thoughts with everyone.
Yes, for sure. You know, the reason that we're here today is because, again, of a dramatic situation that happened a couple of days ago on July 27. Most of the bears that we see at Brooks River, they're known individuals who have used the river in previous years. Through the webcams, we get to witness their stories of resilience and toughness. We watch how they overcome pain and injury, how they face and deal with competition, how they grow and learn through experience. We get to see their moments of joy. We get to see the fun that they have during a play fight, maybe a sense of satisfaction that they must feel with a belly full of salmon in them. However, the webcams are live. The footage is unedited, uncensored, which means we also see bears face hardship, hunger, injury, pain, and sometimes even death. So what we're going to talk about today is a situation where we had an adult male attack a cub, again on July 27. The cub survived, but the attack is violent. So we're going to show that footage. I just want to warn everybody beforehand when we show that footage, just be aware that the attack is violent. The mother fights back. She intervenes. She saves the cub. There's a lot going on. We're going to walk through the clips. After we kind of show the attack, we're going to show that, and then we're going to walk through the clips more slowly to talk about bear behavior and answer some audience questions that were submitted in advance about the situation. And if you're looking for an update on the cub, right now I can say that it is with mom. It's mobile. It's injured. It's probably in pain, but it's mobile. It's with its mother still. So that's good news. I think there definitely is reason for hope, and we're going to talk about that later in the broadcast as well. I'm going to give more details on what rangers have seen in person toward the end of the broadcast. And we know that these situations provoke many questions and a lot of strong emotions. So we'll do our best to help you understand the behaviors of the bears that we'll see in this footage, and especially in the context of what happened on Saturday. And again, we'll answer a few viewer questions that were submitted in advance. And we're all going to try to talk with each other about how we cope with these situations and give you some hints on how you can help wild bears live their best lives. Before we jump into the replay of the footage from July 27, though, I want to introduce the two adult bears who this story revolves around. Sarah, do you want to talk about the adult female in our footage?
Yeah, so the adult female with first of the year cubs of the year, or springers, is 128 Grazer. This is her third litter. Grazer is pretty identifiable by her puffy blonde ears, and the fact that this year she is one of the only ones we see with first of the year cubs. So yeah, she is a pretty dominant female in the hierarchy. She's been frequenting Brooks River since she was a subadult, and I think even since she was a cub herself. But she is a known bear who fishes the lip of the falls quite often. That is kind of her spot to be fishing, and she's known to be, I don't want to say an aggressive mother, but she is definitely protective of her cubs. She has brought all three of her litters up to the lip of the falls to fish there, and is extremely protective of her cubs, as we'll see in just a little bit.
Yeah, she is one of the most defensive bears that I have ever seen. Now, the situation from a couple of days ago has to do with an adult male who actually I think might be at the falls right now eating a fish at the boulders. That is number 32, Chunk. Naomi, will you tell us a little bit about Chunk?
Yeah, that is 32 Chunk over there. 32 Chunk is 19 years old now, which is really an adult bear in his prime. He's been here his entire life. And he I started watching him when he was a young adult bear, and I most remember him for being a very playful bear. He would play fight for hours on end with 89 backpack, but he is a large bear, and large bears, it matters in the hierarchy about size, and he's becoming more aggressive. And as you can see, he has that scar across his nose, which makes him very identifiable besides his huge light bulb shaped body. But in the last couple of years, he's been, how do we say, throwing his weight around. And he hasn't been able to be the most dominant bear the last couple of years because bears 856 and 747 have had those titles. But this year, he really is the most dominant bear on the river. And I think one of the things we see with all really dominant bears is that they have attitude, and they seem to prove their strong presence and their position in the hierarchy. And 32 Chunk is definitely doing that this year around the river.
He certainly commands respect, when he's walking through the river and fishing. Now, let's go to what happened a couple of days ago. And again, it does show the adult male Chunk attacking a first-year cub, and it is violent. We'll see the mother intervene and fight back. The cub does survive, but I want to show sort of like the first maybe 3 minutes of this in full so everyone can see what happened. I'll point out the bears, I'll talk about where they are, and then we'll break down the footage a bit more carefully. So Candace, if you want to go ahead and start that clip. So this is again from July 27, bears virtually everywhere at the waterfall. Chunk is on the far side right now. He is kind of at upper left. He's moving down river right now. Other bears in the vicinity. And Grazer's, now we get to see her on top of the falls with her cubs. So she has 2 first-year cubs. They have trouble navigating the water. One of them falls over. The other one eventually falls over the waterfall as well. Now, Grazer responds to this quite quickly. She knows this is a dangerous situation, so she goes downstream. But Chunk immediately starts targeting one of the cubs. Grazer intervenes. Now, she fights him off initially, but she has 2 cubs in 2 different places, and it's hard for her to defend both of them at the same time. Chunk is very interested in this situation. Grazer continues to back him off. One cub is swimming towards the far side of the river for safety there. The other one is in the middle of the current, as we can see, and that's the one right now that 32 seems to be perhaps more interested in. Now Grazer's looking for both her cubs. She turns towards the second one. That opens an opportunity for Chunk to grab the first one. We can let this roll. Actually, the internet hiccups at this point. So you see Grazer fighting a second bear. We're going to talk about that later on in the broadcast. There's so much going on here. Bears start to stampede everywhere. Grazer continues to fight Chunk and keep Chunk away from her cub. This cub is going to continue drifting downstream. Chunk is going to continue to show interest in the family itself. The other one on the far side, we know, made it to safety. It ended up climbing a tree. Grazer retrieved it later on. But the cub that Chunk ended up grabbing was injured in this situation. So it's having trouble moving in the current. And it's going to eventually drift downstream. Chunk is going to move towards it. And Grazer's going to keep getting in his face. So that's essentially, what happened in brief. So there's more to it than that, and we want to talk our way through this and pause on different sections, give you different views of the falls, because the Riffles camera, the Falls Low camera, and our Brooks Falls High camera all give us different perspectives. And again, thanks to our camera operators for trying to keep track of this. Great work that they did. really difficult to try to manage all of these different cameras and follow the bears at the same time. So again, you can see towards the end of this clip, Grazer moving downstream to retrieve her other cub, Chunk, in pursuit during that situation. So let's go back now and break this down a bit more carefully. Let's start with our falls low camera and watch what Grazer was doing right before this, because this situation again is a bit precipitated by the vulnerability of the cubs in this situation. And we did have an audience question about this. Sue was wondering, why would Grazer place her cubs in that area of the falls, especially in the part near Chunk? She is successful fishing in all areas of Katmai. So Naomi, I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, Grazer is an incredible angler and she is very successful. She's not successful everywhere. I mean, the safest place for family groups is the lower river, but she's never really fished the lower river very much. Her successful fishing is on the lip and in the riffles. And the other thing about this, she's had these cubs and previous litters go over the falls, and there haven't been severe consequences. So it doesn't put her on high alert, although she did go into high alert in the situation. I mean, she really understood the danger.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we can go back to the towards the beginning of that first clip that we showed everybody, the Falls High view, the main Brooks Falls camera, when the cubs go over the waterfall, you can see Grazer on high alert. Like when her cubs have tumbled over the falls before, she's been on alert, and it happened earlier this year, but she wasn't as like stressed out about it or concerned as she was in this moment. She is immediately reactive to this situation because she knows this could really go bad for her. And we see that there's bears everywhere. So different bears are reacting to to the cubs in different ways. Susan, what do you see in the initial reaction of a lot of the bears when Grazer comes down the falls?
So I see that some of the bears are ignoring it and just continuing on. Others seem to notice the action going on and are looking in that direction. And that one bear retreats quite quickly. That bear wants to get out of that space. And so you had different reactions from these vast number of bears present at that moment.
It really does show the individuality of the different bears and how they're reacting in this situation. Some really just want to get out of the way. Now let's talk about Chunk's behavior a bit more specifically. We did have a question I think that kind of represents a lot of questions that people were wondering about Chunk and his behavior. Karen was wondering, was Chunk just being a bear and doing what comes naturally, or do you think something may be wrong with him and that is sparking these attacks? He also got in a fight and an attack with an older cub, I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. So I think that's why these attacks is in this question here. But Sarah, what are your thoughts on Chunk's behavior in these situations?
Yeah, I mean, right before this happened, he was just doing his thing and fishing, and you can kind of see him there. Once the cub comes over, he starts to go after it. And I don't know that we will really know why he does that, whether something is wrong with him or not. We really don't know if there's anything wrong. It could be just instinctual for boars specifically, to want to have sows to not have cubs. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but I don't know that there's anything wrong with him. And yeah, he was just a bear following his instincts. I did want to bring up that other question though, Mike, from Julie. I know Chunk was just defending his space when Grazer's cub comes by him, but what do you think he wanted to continue? Why do you think he wanted to continue after the cub? So with both of these questions, I was talking with our park biologist this morning, Leslie Scora, and she said we don't know why bears do what they do, and oftentimes biologists and other scientists will refer back to like 3 main theories on why a boar may attack a cub or go after a cub. And that could be to send the sow back into estrus so that he can then mate and pass on his genes. And then these other two reasons kind of go hand in hand, needing nutrition either from the cub itself or competing with this sow for food resources. So when he does this, it could be a dominance display, it could be instinctual, it could be that it's still kind of mating season, so that testosterone in male bears is still really high. So we really don't know why the boars do what they do. But so yeah, I don't know that we have a good answer to why we think this or why he would continue after the cub, but those are kind of the three things that we see boars attacking cubs for: mating and nutrition and competition of resources. I mean, 32 was not courting 128 at this time, so mating is probably not it. Obviously, 32 does not need any sort of nutrition. He was there fishing as much as he could, and they all are at this point. And then competition of resources. I mean, he is the most dominant bear. I don't think he needs to compete with 128 over those fishing resources. So we won't know for sure why he did what he did.
Yeah, so much of biology boils down to the pursuit of food or energy, and sex. But with intelligent animals that have such a variety of behaviors, again, we would love to just be able to ask them, why did you do this? But unfortunately, we can't. But yeah, I think this was again an example of Cubs being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Chunk seeing an opportunity, some sort of instinct did kick in with him, and maybe that's why he continued to pursue the cub downstream. After he engaged with Grazer and the cub, it really did seem like something was triggered in him, but we don't know why. And I find it fascinating. Candace, if you could pause it like right here or just back up like 2 or 3 seconds, because that other cub is going on to the far side of the waterfall. There's a big adult male sitting right there, near the cliff on the far side. That's 151 Walker. He's a very dominant adult male, and he's just kind of looking at the situation. He doesn't go after that cub either. So again, it was something very peculiar happening with Chunk in this moment in time that caused him to react this way. And I wish we could ask him why. We're just, I think that's going to be one of our themes, Sarah, throughout the program today, is that we don't know, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's transition now to Grazer's behavior, because she is courageous, she's defensive. Naomi, we saw her not hesitate at all to intervene in this situation, and I think that might have saved her cub's life.
I'm sure it did. I mean, she did not hesitate at all to defend her cub against a bear that was being aggressive and is at least twice her size. And she continued to fight back. I think the one mistake she made, and it's a natural mistake, she has two cubs there. And she, for a moment, looked away to see what was going on with the other cub. And that's when the first cub went right into Chunk. And I'm going to add one other thing about Chunk's behavior. And this is something that I feel like I learned from last year with 26. Cubs will fight back, and that will probably just increase the attack. The cub being attacked is not going to back off and just be limp. It's going to fight. But Grazer was relentless, and she kept going after Chunk. And you remember, I can't. Time flies by. When 910 was defending her cub, she hesitated for a minute. Now, luckily, it was an older cub and it wasn't injured, but Grazer did not hesitate. And she is fierce in a really great way, like no other bear. And I think part of this with 151 is that I think he has finally learned a lesson about Grazer, and he was not going to interfere.
That's an interesting thought. You know, if he recognizes his Grazer's cubs and he's had one too many run-ins with Grazer, he's like, no, that's not going to do it. But yeah, again, Grazer fearless. She didn't hesitate. I really do think that saved her cub's life, because it may not have taken more than a couple more seconds for Chunk to subdue that cub more fully. But there's, you know, besides the behavior of Chunk and Grazer in the situation, lots of other bears in the area doing interesting things. And I know we had a lot of questions about this as well, because each bear is reacting to this sort of in its own way. Some are ignoring what's going on. Some are looking for fishing opportunities. Some initially seem to be drawn towards the interaction. So let's cut to our riffles camera right now and get a view from there. At first, you know, the behavior of the bears is really kind of far away, but you'll see initially sort of like this rush of bears towards the situation when Grazer gets down the waterfall with her cubs. And Candace, we may need to fast forward this just a little bit. Sorry, I didn't cut it to the right spot. So yeah, when Grazer engages with Chunk, we see that bears start actually kind of running towards the situation at first. And somebody was wondering about that. So Suze was wondering, why did the majority of bears run towards Chunk when he attacked the cub? Was it the distress sounds from the cub that drew them in? And I don't think it was the distress sounds. My best guess is that they saw a lot of splashing. They thought maybe the bears were fighting over fish, or maybe there was like a school of fish splashing in that area, because on this day, there wasn't a lot of fish available at the waterfall. That's why there were so many bears packed into such a small space. On days when there are a lot of salmon jumping, a lot of food available, you don't see as many bears concentrating at Brooks Falls, because the bears get their fill. They can fish elsewhere more successfully, more easily. So I think that's the main reason why a lot of these bears kind of ran or looked initially in the direction of the fighting pair. That's my best guess, though. I don't know that Rangers or Naomi, do you have any other thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there were, you know, a lot of bears, not a lot of salmon. I think I think you're probably right. And then there was an oops moment, right, where they all stopped and ran in the other direction, right? There they go. It's like, oh, fish. And then oops, right? They
Right.
realize, oh my God, we don't want to get entangled with Chunk or Grazer.
And we did, you know, there was another very interesting interaction with an independent bear that came into the mix partway through this. And this has to do, so Christy brought up a question that was wondering about this. Christy asked, did 128 Grazer fight off two bears, or one twice, or three? Am I just completely confused by the videos? No, you're not. I had to watch this several times to figure it out myself. There was a second question related to this, and I forgot to write down who wrote this. Sorry about that. But somebody asked, can you talk a little bit about the other bears during the Grazer Chunk incident? I believe 504 came over. Is it in a bear's nature to intervene or try to help in situations like this? In my opinion, bears aren't necessarily looking out to help other bears, but we did see 504. Candace, if we can back up to the point where we see all the bears sort of running towards the fight itself, we'll see one get basically directly in the mix. Yeah, maybe just a little bit before that. Yeah, thank you. We'll see one rushing sort of straight in to the mix here. The others are like, oh, maybe there's fish there. And then they turn around, but one gets right up into there. And so all of a sudden, Grazer is actually kind of fighting two bears at the same time. That's a mother bear that gets into this. It's number 504. She actually has two fourth summer cubs, so 3.5-year-old cubs. I don't think she did it because she thought they were in danger, although I can't rule that out. Maybe she thought that, you know, she saw a cub in distress and thought she should help. Perhaps, you know, her maternal instincts came in. I don't know if either of those is correct. Maybe she did really think that her cubs were under threat in that situation, and she thought, you know, she had to go over and deal with it. I don't know. That was a really curious behavior by 504. Naomi, I know you had some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I think she and her cubs were close enough that I think she went in to defend, and I'm not sure if she went in to attack just Chunk or both of them, because that's not that far, and that could have been it. And then once she's engaged with Grazer, I mean, one of Grazer's cubs is right there, so Grazer doesn't care who it is. She's gonna fight with any bear that's in that vicinity. So I think that my take is perhaps 504 went in there to defend her cubs, but then it became a real fight because Grazer was defending her cub that you can see is right there.
Yeah,
But
it
we don't
was
know.
really, we don't know. Curious behavior. Again, we wish we could ask them, but we're just not going to know in this situation. But I don't think Grazer realized what was going on there. So all of a sudden she's fighting two bears and she backs both of them off somehow. Um, but this, again, the continued defense by Grazer was interesting. She never gave up. We can let this roll and see how and how Chunk continues to follow the family downstream. And Sarah, there was a question that you had some thoughts on. Nancy wrote in and was wondering if mother bears are fiercely protective of their cubs, why do they let them come out amongst so many large adult bears? Is there an unknown, long-standing agreement amongst the Katmai bears? So why are mother bears bringing their cubs to the falls when we know it's such a risky move?
Yeah. Again, this whole question of why do bears do what they do, we'll never really know. The best guess for this question here, why does 128, or why do other fiercely protective mother bears bring their cubs out to the falls? I mean, the answer to that is food. These bears are driven by their instinct to survive. And food is their main way to do that, to be able to, I mean, mother bears specifically have to eat so much in order to care for their cubs and to ensure their survival. So they are coming out against with all of these large bears in order to feast on this massive food source. As far as an unknown long-standing agreement among these Katmai bears, yeah, they probably don't have a contract with each other, right? We kind of joked about that earlier. And it's one of those things where, again, bears are solitary creatures. They do not have a pack mentality. They defend themselves, and a mother bear will defend herself and her cubs. But they are solitary creatures. They do not necessarily want to be around all of these other bears, to have to fight for territory and fight for food. So the only sort of agreement that they have, and who knows if it's really an agreement, but it's like, hey, you have to fish here, I have to fish here, you're going to stay there, I'm going to stay here, and if we get into each other's spaces, then we're going to have a fight about it. And that's what we see is a cub coming out of the realm, that relatively safe area around its mother, to, of course it was an accident. They fell down the falls, but they got into the space of another bear, and so now they're fighting it out for food, essentially, whether 32 is going to eat that cub, which thankfully he didn't. But food is the main driver for bears to be this close to each other, and these sows are bringing their cubs to these places because there is so much of a food resource there, and it is so easy to gain access to food there. So that's my best guess for why. But again, the theme of this is we don't really know why bears do what they do.
A lot of mystery involved in their behaviors. In this, earlier in this clip, we could see how prolonged this interaction was between Chunk and Grazer. He continued to follow the family downstream, and to kind of wrap up maybe sort of what happened in this. He did leave the waterfall eventually, but he went back in the vicinity of where the other cub was up in a tree safely. I really couldn't tell from the footage whether he showed curiosity towards that other cub or not, but he did walk up the river and walk underneath the tree. He came back to the river several minutes later. Whether he was looking for the cubs or not, I'm not sure. But something was triggered in his pursuit of that cub, because he wasn't engaged initially. Like, he wasn't really showing interest in the cubs above the waterfall. It just was like bad luck for the cubs. They sort of just drifted into him, and all of a sudden he's like, hey, what's this? I know what this is. This is a cub. I have no doubt that he knew it was a cub and that he knew what he was doing, but why? Again, I don't think we're going to be able to answer that question, unfortunately. So that's like the big mystery of it all. Yeah, go ahead, Naomi.
Yeah, I wanted to add one other thing about why sows would come to a dangerous place like this with their cubs, and I just wanted to comment on the energy expenditure of a mother bear. She is producing very high fat milk for her cubs. She is having to try and keep them safe. She is feeding them. She is feeding herself. So the drive to be in a productive fishing spot, and where they've learned to it is most productive is quite great. I mean, they're expending so much energy. I mean, if you think about Fat Bear Week, we don't have a Fat Bear Week champion when the year a sow has been a mother. And that's because they're spending a lot of energy and they need to eat. So we don't know why, but we do know, as Sarah said, the drive for food and survival is primary, and that brings them to prime fishing spots, which are sometimes really dangerous.
Now, I know that Ranger Susan has been waiting patiently to give us an update on what rangers have been seeing on the ground at Brooks River. Susan's the only one of us who's actually there, who had been there this weekend and had the opportunity to go to the waterfalls. So Susan, thanks so much for being patient, hanging out with us, and until we could get to you, because we wanted to talk about the update. So I know that you've been able to see this family in person after this whole thing went down. So what have you seen since then?
Well, the first evening, I saw the injured cub just really lying on its right hand side of its body, and was just bawling, and would move its leg, its left leg, and kind of kick out, and would raise its arm a little bit, and would lick at its paw. And it was raining that day, and I thought, perhaps the cub was trying to get some hydration. At the time that I was present, I didn't see suckling occurring, but that was just while I was present. The following day, the cub was positioned in a different area, and I saw that the cub was more was bawling less, and was moving its mouth and opening up its jaw, and would try and kick out, but was bawling less. And the non-injured cub was around. It was in the area, and it was kind of checking on the injured cub, and Grazer was around as well, and she'd come in and kind of check the area. She would position herself underneath the treehouse platform, and the non-injured cub would go in, and I imagine either stay close to her or suckle, and do that. And then there was a point where came out, and she was digging at the ground with her paws and kind of trying to cover up the injured cub with some grass. And that cub was able to maneuver itself out from under the grass, and just kind of stayed there. So today, I was able to be at the falls prior to the preparation for our broadcast. the injured cub raise itself up on its two hind legs and move towards a different corner of the platform intersection and kind of sit on the grass and was actually chewing on grass. And in the time that I have left the falls and I'm here at Brooks Camp, one of my fellow rangers, Ranger Gill, provided us with an update, and he was able to see, as you're seeing on the clip right now, that the injured cub was able to move over to the riffles platform and actually drank water, and that this was occurring while Grazer was out fishing, and the non-injured sibling actually would come and stay in the area and check on the injured cubs. So it was walking on its rear legs, as Ranger Gill indicated, but looking better than what he and I observed this morning. And my thanks to Ranger Gill for that update.
Yeah, quite amazing to see, this cub gaining mobility kind of day by day. We don't know specifically what its injuries are. It seems to not be placing weight on its front paws, but it's with mother. Grazer never gave up on it. I think that's an important thing to consider, like the devotion of Mother Bear here. She never gave up on the cub. She has both of them with them. She's been very attentive to both of them. Susan, one of the things that we talked about before the broadcast is about whether that cub has been suckling any milk, and we had a question about that because there's been rumors on the internet that Grazer hasn't been nursing the injured cub. So Carol actually asked about that and wrote in and said, thoughts on why Grazer's not nursing her injured cub? Does she know his throat may still be too sore? So I don't know if we can say conclusively whether Grazer has not been nursing the cub. It's maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, just during the day when people have been at the falls, they haven't seen it.
That's correct. Like in the times that I have been present, I did not see the injured cub suckling on with Grazer. However, that may be occurring. We're just not there to see it, and so it's possible that suckling has been occurring, but it may be when the falls are closed and none of us are present and we don't observe it. So there's no way to say that absolutely not, she is not suckling, because the possibility exists.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't have cameras everywhere to follow the movements of all the bears. So again, one of those mysteries that we don't know of right now. But the fact that the cub is mobile, even if it has limited mobility, certainly I think is a positive sign. Sarah, I had a question come in that I thought we could answer. This one comes from Kate. This actually kind of goes back to the motivation of mother bears at the waterfalls. And Kate was wondering, why might 128 Grazer continue to take her cubs to the falls after the other was so injured from being there? Grazer is a smart, experienced bear, so I'm sure she has her reasons. Because we saw in a clip earlier that that Grazer was near the falls yesterday with her her apparently healthy cub.
Yeah, it seems like 128 has kind of stashed her injured cub pretty close to the falls, and that could be for a lot of reasons, which we'll get to in a little bit. But so to not have to move the injured cub very far is probably really helpful, to not expend a lot of energy. And then, we've talked about this before. 128 knows how to fish at the falls. Naomi mentioned earlier that we don't really see her down in the lower river where it is usually safer for family groups to be. But 128 has successfully taught two other litters of cubs to fish at the falls. That is kind of where she goes. That's where she knows to fish, and that's where she brings her cubs. So we don't know what it is she's thinking, but it's likely that she has had these other experiences where she has been able to successfully raise these litters around that area. So if it's worked for her in the past, she is probably has the instincts to do that again, to raise them there again. So she is
Well, it sounds like Sarah's internet broke up for just a moment. Hopefully she'll be right back. But yeah, great points all around. Sorry, Sarah, we lost you
Oh,
for
did
a
I
few seconds. Are you
get cut
back?
out?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I
Yeah,
think
start
I'm
with
The
the
back.
last.
wonders of Cape
I'm sorry. Start where? I think I'm still cutting in and out. Sorry, you guys.
Yeah, maybe start with the
Um,
last 15 seconds of your statement.
Yeah, so she's a smart, experienced bear, as Kate had said, and yeah, she will. That cub is stashed, so she's just gonna keep it there, not move it where if it doesn't need to move, and just continue to fish where she knows how to fish.
Mike, I wanted to add a couple things to that, a couple
Yes.
of observations. When I did see Grazer on the lip at some point this weekend with the healthy cub, um, that cub was kind of gun shy, and would retreat to the top of the fish ladder when any bear came by. So there was a lesson there. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was in 2015 when 451, some of you people know 451 had one of her yearlings succumb to canine adenovirus, and it collapsed right in front of the lower river cam. And she stayed with that cub until it took its last breath. But she did, with the healthy cub, go off to fish and drink water periodically. So Grazer's behavior seems consistent with what we've seen in other situations.
Yeah, that's very true. Bears are driven by instinct, but they're intelligent animals. I think there's a lot of stuff going on in their brains. It's not just kind of like pure instinct that drives them at all, because they adjust their behaviors to cope with a situation like this. So Grazer, is adjusting her behavior. We've seen other mother bears do that in the past as well, depending on the situation. Maybe this is live. Is this live footage right now? Because Grazer's just walking out of our frame here on the left-hand side. So that'd be cool if she was at the falls while we're talking right now. Let's answer a couple of more questions before we conclude our broadcast. This is, again, kind of goes back to motivations, thinking about like the behavior of mother bears and how they can adjust their behavior to deal with the plight of their cubs. Terry was wondering, any chance 128 uses the human traffic at the treehouse as a safe space to hide the small injured cub? Naomi, we were talking before the broadcast about this.
Yeah, I think it's a good thought and a good observation. I have seen over the years 128 Grazer nurse her cubs under the treehouse. So she obviously feels that's a safe place for her, because when they're nursing, that's a kind of vulnerable position to be in. But mother bears also will use people as protection, in that where there are people, they're usually not big boars. The big boars don't prefer to be around human beings. And so the treehouse is a likely spot for her and a smart spot for her. Bear 94 has hung around the lower river near camp and in camp and under the bridge, and she will sleep under there because there's a lot of human traffic and not a lot of traffic of big bears. So I think it's it's historically been a safe place for her and her cubs, and I think the fact that people are there is part of that measure of safety for her.
Yeah, again, bears, they recognize opportunity when they see it. So if there's an opportunity to be in a place where there are fewer large threatening bears, then hey, they're going to do it if they can tolerate the presence of people. And I apologize to our audience because I should have put like an aerial view of the treehouse and the riffles and everything together so you could kind of get a better picture of this. The camera that we're looking at right now is about 100 yards downstream of Brooks Falls, so it's not that great of a distance. For people, there's a walkway, there's an elevated boardwalk that connects those two areas. The treehouse is a covered platform in between. So anyway, I hope that makes sense to you. Sorry for not bringing a map in ahead of time. Sarah, we have one. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So there's the riffles, right where the S is on riffles. That is basically where the treehouse is located. So if you're looking to get an understanding of where that is, there's a lot of questions, Sarah, we had actually about like the park and the rangers' abilities to intervene, their willingness to intervene. What is the policy to intervene? Whether it's appropriate to intervene. We can't answer all of those questions at once, but I think this one question maybe helps us dive into that topic. So Sally was wondering, is there any circumstance under which the rangers would intervene to help an injured, sick, or dying bear or cub?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of questions on what is the park going to do in this situation. And I think a lot of people have discovered that the park is probably not going to do anything really to intervene in this particular situation. I do want to drive home the fact that these are wild brown bears. We do not know what they're thinking. We do not know why they do what they do. And they are wild animals. The cameras, these falls cams that we get a chance to view and watch, give us a glimpse uh, into this bear ecosystem and their behavior. So we do get a chance to observe wild bears in a wild setting, which is it's the only camera really that'll get you there. I know Explorer has a couple of others, but anyway, as I digress, I do want to also kind of highlight the park mission and park values on this sort of thing. So, Katmai provides an extraordinary bear viewing opportunity and affords visitors a glimpse into the natural drama and dynamic interplay found within this untouched ecosystem. And the Park Service and Katmai in general, we strive to preserve natural and cultural resources unimpaired. So, allowing these natural processes to play out as they would without any sort of human intervention. There is already such a human impact at Brooks Camp with how many people visit on a daily basis with these human boardwalks and getting that close to bears. There already is a lot of human intervention happening. As far as intervening in a circumstance like this, it is our job to allow nature to remain wild and to play out as it plays out. Um, Oftentimes, if we were to intervene, it wouldn't just be scooping up that cub and getting a vet involved. It would also be you would have to sedate the entire family, and that can create more issues down the line as well. To tranquilize three bears, try to assess its needs, and then not have any recovery for that time for those bears, and to send them back out into the wild, that's just not feasible or very kind. So just letting nature play out as it does is kind of what the park rangers are doing here. As far as an answer to this question, is there any circumstance under which the rangers would intervene and help an injured, sick, or dying bear or cub? It has happened in the past with 854 Divot. She had a snare around her neck, and yes, there's another bear this year that has a snare around its neck. And the Park Service did intervene in that situation because humans caused that problem. So it it was deemed appropriate for humans to resolve that problem. So as far as the bear that currently has the snare around its neck, it could happen that humans intervene again when appropriate, but has not yet happened. So as far as this bear goes, it's back on its feet. It looks like it's drinking water. It went through a really terrible thing. But we are just going to continue to see as this plays out how nature acts, what nature does.
Yeah, thanks for those thoughts. It's no ranger that I've ever met, and I've met a lot, being a former ranger, thinks that or finds somehow pleasure in animals suffering. So to protect the natural processes, that's essentially what the park is for. So it's very difficult sometimes for rangers to let so-called nature take its course. But that's policy, the feasibility of it all, and we know that some people are going to disagree with that, and that's okay. But Congress is not out there appropriating money to hire wildlife veterinarians. There's just not that. There's no money in the budget for that. Plus, these spaces protect the wild processes as much as, and the harsh realities of nature as much as like the beauty that we enjoy on them. Now, this transitioning to final couple of questions that I had for everybody. This is about like coping, like because we see the bears, we the if we're watching the cameras more than just a little while, we're probably finding some joy and some meaning in the bears and getting to know the individuals, connecting with them, caring for them in their habitat. So how does everybody cope with situations like this when we end up seeing the harsh realities of the bear world? So Susan, the four of us were talking about this earlier, but I think you had a really good way of presenting how you cope with situations that are obviously very hard to watch.
Yes, yes. And if we can review that clip of the injured cub over by the riffles right there, um, I have hope. I have hope. It was very sad and heart wrenching to witness this injured cub since this happened on the 27th. The 27th, was difficult. He was bawling a lot. It looked like, he was trying to keep himself hydrated. The 28th, it was very sad. I wasn't sure of what the outcome was going to be, but today I have hope. I have hope. This incredible wild creature has had the fortitude to stand up, as we see right there in the clip, on his rear legs, and it gives me hope. And so I latch onto that, and I have optimism, and that's how I cope with these realities of the brown bear life. And so, what about you, Sarah? How do you cope with these kinds of circumstances?
Yeah, thanks for sharing the thought of having some hope, Susan, because definitely it can be really emotional to watch these sorts of things. And I think the way that helps me understand what's going on um, is trying to take the emotion, like feeling my feelings, right? Allowing myself to have those emotions, but then also knowing that again, these are wild animals, and wild animals will do what wild animals do. So just kind of knowing that this will not be the end for bears, they will continue on. Um, that is just kind of, I try to keep a mental clarity with knowing that these are wild animals and there is no control over it. I'm grateful that we get to watch them and observe what they do. But yeah, just knowing that they they are wild and we are just going to watch these processes play out is kind of my way of keeping things straight in my brain. Naomi?
Yeah. So yeah, messages of
Or am
hope.
I going right?
Yeah. Sorry. No. Go ahead. Yeah. Messages of hope, and then also messages of considering again the harsh reality of the world and that nature is going to be nature. The good and the bad. Naomi, what do you have to add? Oh, Naomi, we cannot hear you.
Oh dear. I mute so you don't hear my dog.
Hey,
Um,
okay. Hey, now you're back. Thanks.
I am back. So I it's for me it's a process to learn how to cope with this. Um the first time I saw a bear die, or the first time I saw a boar go after a cub, it was very, very difficult. But I have learned over time, like Sarah says, to put it in context. And part of that context is to think about the enormous privilege that we have to be able to watch these bears and their lives in every dimension, and the joy that we get from them in fruitful and happy moments. But in order to have that privilege, we also are going to have to learn how to witness tough moments like we did this weekend. And I also take away the glory of Grazer, who is just a phenomenally inspiring bear to me. And I do love Susan's message of hope. It gives me hope. I like to believe where there is life, there can be hope, and maybe we can just hold on to that when we're watching these amazing wild creatures.
And I try to, incorporate a lot of these things into that what everyone else has said too into my coping mechanisms with this. I especially I've mentioned this in prior years as well when we've talked about situations like this. I do try to channel my inner Spock if I can. I love bears, but finding that if I can compartmentalize my emotions, then I can maybe look at their behaviors a bit more objectively, and I can review footage like this a bit more objectively. I can do my job a little bit easier in that sense. That's one of the things that works for me. But again, to continue my sort of Star Trek metaphor, Spock is also half human, so he has emotions, sometimes very strong emotions too. So I realize I'm just one person, and my brain doesn't work like everybody else's. So learning, uh, that's just how I deal with it, and I'm not expecting others to be able to process it in the same way. But that's just one thing that helps me. Hopefully, it'll help a few others. But also learning about what we know and what we don't know is one of the best ways that I try to help myself. Again, if we, the mystery is there's a ton of mystery involved in these situations, and I think it's great for me just to kind of admit that I'm not going to know, that we're not going to know truly what is going on in the bear's brains. If I'm feeling really stressed out, I try to get exercise, take a walk in the woods, or like yesterday even, I couldn't handle the internet for a while, so I took a bike ride. I took a walk in the woods on the same day. I got really sweaty, felt great. And I felt better energized today to be able to take care of to be able to talk about this. And then also, helping other people, that helps me too. So helping people watching the bear cams find relevance and meaning in the non-human world, the bears, the salmon, the environment that they inhabit, that helps me cope as well. I want to end this broadcast though with one final question for my co-hosts. We have all of this energy, like we see these situations, it can make your adrenaline rush. So we see like a mother bear defending her cubs in this situation. How can we channel that energy into helping the bears? So Susan, I'll start with you. How can we help the bears at Katmai and elsewhere?
Well, I would say that anytime that we are in bear habitat, to properly manage our food and our gear, and not allowing that opportunity for bears to associate food or gear with human beings, because that just puts the bears and the humans in danger. And I would also say that giving them the space that they deserve, not impacting their behavior, not impacting their habitat, letting them live naturally in the place that they live. And in a broader sense, in urban areas, being mindful of those bird feeders and the bird seed that for bears in more urban habitats, that creates an association and invites human bear conflict, as well as not just the bird seed feeders, but also access to dog food. So I would recommend those things. if we could make those, honor those, be cautious about those things, we can strengthen the health and safety and well-being of bears and minimize those and allow them to live their natural lives.
What
Sarah,
about you,
what
Sarah?
about you?
Yeah, I do want to echo what you're saying there, Susan. There are bear populations all over the place. I think with being able to watch these Katmai bears, it can sometimes be. I know that I sometimes think like, oh man, these are the only bears that I want to watch. But I also live in Alaska, and so these are definitely not the only bears. Especially in this state and even down in the lower 48, there are so many different populations of bears. And so I think I'm always a big proponent of education and learning and even doing some self-learning and self-research and things like that. So figuring out where your closest population of bears are, what their greatest concern is at that moment, whether it's habitat degradation or whatever it is in your area of your closest population of bears. And you might not know this, but there could be bears in your backyard. Maybe not literally, but pretty close to it. So I think learning about all of the populations of bears in general, and finding out closest to you what is in your backyard, and what do those bears need? I mean, the bears here at Katmai, they've got plenty of salmon. They have a protected wilderness to live in. But what is it in your area that bears around your area may need help in?
Naomi, what do you suggest we can do to help bears?
Well, Mike, you cited Spock. I'm going to cite Aretha, Respect. I think that we need to respect the bears. We need to respect their ecosystems, the environment that is all connected and keeps them healthy and keeps us healthy. Mike said he went out for a bike ride. I went out to the harbor here to watch the water and the fishing boats. And I think if we respect the environment around us and respect the creatures that live in it, then we can help the bears. And I will make one more plug for the Katmai Conservancy, which is an organization that helps support the park. And you can help support the park by supporting the Katmai Conservancy.
Absolutely, great point. A large percentage of the seasonal park rangers at Katmai are funded through donations and grants to the Katmai Conservancy. So the many different ways that we can help bears. I think we can find hope in the ability of bears to heal and cope with injury and pain. So in ways, they sort of like inspire us maybe to work harder, and our curiosity might be inspired by not knowing everything about a situation. We've talked about sort of how we can't ask the bears, so we don't really know the motivations with how some of these bears were or why they were behaving the way they do. Maybe we can be more motivated to fight for things that matter after seeing Grazer's courage, for instance. She risked everything for her cub against a much bigger opponent, and it seems like she may have prevailed. Bears like Chunk also deserve a chance too. He's a successful, powerful bear that gets to go where he pleases. He probably has access to many more mating opportunities than the average male because of his size and his strength. And that his behavior, was well within the norms of what is considered normal for bear society. So for me, I always are thinking about how can I work to protect bear habitat? How can I give these bears the chance to survive in the wild, to live their best lives, even if that comes with risk and pain and injury? So if you, again, like others have said, learn more about bears, like Sarah said, if you and respect them, like Naomi said, and also respect them and make sure they're not tempted by human foods or play toys, like Susan said. If we can share our home communities with bears and we can reduce conflict with them, then we can make sure that bear populations are healthy, doing their thing, and also work to address climate change as soon as possible. For the bears at Katmai, climate change is probably the greatest threat to them because it'll affect the salmon probably negatively in the long term. So yeah, if we can fight climate change as soon as possible, that's maybe one of the most impactful things we can do for Brooks Rivers bears. I want to thank my co-hosts for joining me today, and thanks to everybody who is at home listening. Thanks to everybody who submitted questions. So my co-hosts for today's broadcast, of course, were Naomi Boak with the Katmai Conservancy, and then Katmai National Park Rangers, Susan Contreras and Sarah Bruce. My name is Mike Fitz with Explore.org. We hope you continue watching the cameras. We hope you found this broadcast informative and enjoyable. And until we talk to you again, enjoy the brown bears. And of course, as we like to say at Explore.org, never stop learning.